I remember the first night I ever truly felt alone. The mountain air was cold, carrying a faint metallic tang that made my skin prickle. Fog rolled between the pines like slow-moving shadows, swallowing the trail behind me, and the campfire's pale light flickered against the jagged rocks. Somewhere in the distance, a soft, rustling whispered through the trees. Just wind, I told myself, but my chest tightened with a quiet dread. The static hum of the lantern seemed louder than it should, and every breath I drew felt measured, heavy, as if the night itself was listening. I thought I saw shapes moving beyond the firelight, shadows folding into the fog, impossible to place, yet familiar. I should have ignored it, laughed it off. I should have stayed inside my small tent and slept, but curiosity drew me forward, toward the hollowed sound of snapping twigs. A low growl vibrated through the darkness, deep guttural, impossibly close. And then the stillness returned, leaving only the echo of my heartbeat and the whisper of leaves. That's when I saw it. The forest smelled of wet pine and earth. Dust draped over the trees, softening the world. Shadows stretched long, thin, almost alive. A whisper drifted past me. Not words, just the breath of something unsettled. It seemed to curl around the trunks, slipping between branches. I followed it, hesitant. Each step crushed dry leaves, a crackle in the quiet. The air tasted faintly of cold metal, and my skin prickled. The lantern flickered. A pale light jumped across the roots. Footprints appeared on the dirt, small, deliberate, but they weren't mine. I stopped. The forest pressed in, heavier than before. Eyes I knew were watching. Nothing moved, nothing breathed, but I felt them. A rustle just behind. Soft, careful. I turned, only the trees swaying without wind. The whisper returned, closer now. It made my ears ache, a low, almost musical vibration. I stepped forward, the lantern casting trembling circles of light. Branches snapped somewhere far off. The sound echoed, though the path showed no one had passed. I held my breath, feeling the forest tighten around me. A flicker at the edge of the light. A shadow moved, but wrong. Its limbs too long, angle sharp. I blinked. It vanished. The whisper softened, then stretched into silence. I could hear my own heartbeat, loud in the emptiness. The scent of damp earth and pine lingered like a warning. I pressed on, lantern swinging, casting fleeting shapes that teased the eye. The footprints reappeared, now closer, as if something was pacing me. A shiver ran along my spine. The air turned colder, though the evening felt calm. I could almost feel a breath brush my neck. Quick, then gone. Stillness returned. The whisper dissolved. Only my steps careful, tentative, marking the dark floor of the forest. I wanted to turn back, but something in me pulled forward, curious, uneasy. The shadows between trees seemed deeper, heavier, and alive. Every tree looked the same, yet every shadow felt different. Eyes, I reminded myself, invisible, patient, waiting. The lantern flickered one last time. A small spark of light revealed the trail ahead, bare, empty, no footprints, no whisper. I froze. The forest exhaled slowly around me. I was alone, yet not alone. The last light of day slipped from the sky. Silence settled, thick, almost tangible. I moved forward, step by careful step, into the gathering dark, and the whisper followed, patient, just out of reach. Morning fog clung to the ridge like a heavy cloth. Every sound was muted, swallowed by the whiteness. The world felt suspended, uncertain. A howl rose from the distance. It wasn't sudden, more like an echo of something old, buried in memory. I shivered, though the air was calm, thick with mist. The fog shifted, shapes appearing and dissolving. Trees looked taller, their branches bending in impossible ways. I felt drawn forward toward the edge of the cliff, though I didn't remember walking. The earth underfoot was soft, damp. Each step made a faint sigh, barely audible. I paused, heart tightening. The ridge seemed alive, aware. Silhouettes moved through the haze. They were not quite human, not quite animal. Eyes might have been watching, though the fog kept secrets well. I inhaled. The cold mist filled my lungs, leaving a metallic taste. The wind whispered over the ridge, carrying hints of voices I could not place. Somewhere distant, the howl came again, closer this time. Branches scraped against one another, unnaturally precise. The fog swirled, curling around my feet like water, a sudden sense of vertigo. Was I closer to the cliff than I realized? I reached for something to steady myself. Nothing, only mist and shadow. The silhouettes shifted, slipping just beyond focus, teasing the eye. A sudden silence fell. The howl stopped mid-breath, leaving only the echo in my bones. I felt watched, though still saw nothing. The fog parted briefly, revealing the edge, rocks jagged, dropping into nothing. I stumbled back instinctively, though I couldn't tell if the pull toward it had ceased. Breath crystallized in the chill. The ridge held its quiet, but the air felt dense, aware. Every sound, my heartbeat, my cautious steps, seemed amplified. Something moved in the periphery, a shape darker than shadow, shifting against the gray. I froze, letting the fog hide me as I watched silently. The ridge exhaled, a low sigh through the trees. I felt my curiosity mingle with fear, an uneasy tether keeping me in place. Step by careful step, I moved along the edge, tracing the unseen path the fog demanded. The distant howl returned, layered, as if multiple voices answered each other. I counted them in my mind. 1, 2, 3, or was it more? The sound resonated in every bone, vibrating through the quiet ridge. The silhouettes drifted closer, though never fully forming. I blinked, and they dissolved into mist. The cliff's edge remained jagged and silent, as if daring me to step closer. The fog wrapped around me, a living presence, hiding the world beyond the ridge. I felt both lost and compelled. The howl lingered, a memory echoing into the present, urging me forward. And I walked, into the fog, into the hush, into the quiet terror of the ridge, alone yet not alone. The forest was quiet, yet the air hummed, a low vibration that seemed to pulse through the soil, through my bones. I felt it before I heard it, a subtle rhythm underfoot. The path stretched ahead, dappled with fading light. Trees swayed gently, though the wind was still. Leaves rustled, whispering secrets I couldn't understand. I paused. The hum stopped. Silence pressed against my ears, heavy and expectant. Then, as I moved forward, it returned, soft, resonant, persistent. A figure appeared between the trunks. Pale eyes glimmered briefly before vanishing into shadow. I blinked, heart skipping, but the path seemed empty again. The hum followed, rising and falling with my steps. It was curious, almost playful, like something testing me. I listened, straining to distinguish rhythm from thought. Branches cracked above, small and deliberate. Shadows shifted at the corners of my vision. The forest felt alive, aware of each hesitant movement I made. The air smelled faintly of damp moss and old pine. I ran a hand along a trunk, rough against my skin, grounding me. Still, the hum pulsed, vibrating through every nerve. A sudden flicker of light caught my eye. Moonlight slicing through the canopy, glancing off something pale. The figure, or something like it, vanished before I could focus. I stopped, breath shallow, ears straining. The hum paused too, leaving only the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. Then it began again, a low, continuous vibration that seemed to guide me forward. The trail twisted unnaturally. Each turn brought another glimpse of those pale eyes, watching, retreating. I felt drawn onward, curiosity mingling with unease. The forest thickened, shadows stretching unervingly long. The hum grew louder, matching my pulse. I realized I could stop it only by stopping myself. I froze, and the world held its breath. Leaves swayed without wind. Trees seemed to lean closer. A faint scent of smoke, or something like it, drifted past. I couldn't tell where it came from, but it made my skin prickle. The hum resumed, gentle now, almost coaxing. I stepped carefully, letting the vibration guide me. The pale-eyed figure lingered in the periphery, always retreating, always watching. I wanted to call, to speak, but my voice was swallowed by the forest. Every sense was heightened, every rustle, every flicker of light felt deliberate, intimate. The trail wound on, humming with life, or something beyond life, The sun dipped lower, but the forest seemed suspended in a gray half-light. I followed, curiosity stronger than fear, though unease pressed against my chest. The humming trail pulsed beneath me, a quiet companion, a hidden warning, and I walked, step by careful step, drawn into the quiet, vibrating heart of the forest. The campfire sputtered, tiny sparks leaping into the dark. The warmth reached my hands, but the forest beyond stayed cold, patient. Shadows stretched unnaturally, curling between the trunks like living smoke. A shape moved at the edge of the firelight, almost human, but then angles shifted, limbs bending too sharply. I blinked. It vanished into the darkness, leaving nothing but the rustle of leaves. Silence pressed in, thick and heavy. Even the crackle of the fire sounded muted, distant. Every sense sharpened. I could feel the forest watching, waiting. The air smelled of soot and damp pine. A faint chill brushed my neck, though the fire burned steadily. I froze, every nerve alert to the smallest motion. Another flicker of movement, just beyond reach. Shadows twisted, overlapping, forming shapes that made no sense. I wanted to look closer, but curiosity fought unease in equal measure. The fire's glow danced over rocks and roots. A twig snapped somewhere behind me, quick and deliberate. I turned, saw nothing, only the trees swaying without wind. The shape reappeared, shifting again as if testing me. Its outline was wrong, fluid, too deliberate. I couldn't tell if it was watching or inviting me closer. A low sigh of air, almost like breath, passed through the clearing. It carried the scent of cold soil and something metallic. I shivered, feeling small, alone, exposed. The fire flickered, casting momentary glimpses of more shapes, figures that existed only in the corner of my vision. Each time I tried to focus, they dissolved, leaving emptiness and fear. I stepped backward, careful, slow. The forest seemed to lean closer, pressing against the warmth of the fire. Every shadow felt deliberate, alive with intent. The silence returned, dense and suffocating. Even the wind held its breath. The fire burned, sparks drifting upward, carrying my unease into the night. I wanted to call it off, to step away into the dark, but something held me, an almost magnetic curiosity, tugging me toward the shapes that shouldn't exist. The shadows twisted one last time, before dissolving completely. The clearing felt empty, yet I knew I wasn't alone. The forest exhaled softly, the rustle of unseen leaves lingering like a whisper. I sat by the fire, trying to calm my pulse. The night stretched around me, vast and silent. And the shapes, they lingered, just beyond the light, patient, waiting. The tent sagged under the night air, fog pressing against its mesh walls. Inside, everything smelled damp and cold. The world outside was muted, muffled, like someone had drawn a curtain over sound itself. The radio crackled, a thin, persistent static filling the small space. I reached to adjust it, but the noise persisted, low and grating, almost deliberate. It wasn't just sound, it was aware. A soft growl began behind the fabric. Low, almost a whisper. It didn't move, yet I felt its presence deliberate and close. I froze, every nerve taut. The fog outside shimmered, but revealed nothing. No shadow, no hint of motion. Only the steady hum of the radio and that quiet growl. My hand shook. The canvas rustled, brushing against my arm as if breathed upon. I wanted to flee, to tear the flap open and run, but something anchored me. Curiosity tangled with fear. The static fluctuated, rising and falling like a heartbeat. I pressed my palms against my thighs, trying to ground myself, feeling the cool nylon under my fingers. The growl softened, then deepened. It circled the tent. Or perhaps circled me. I dare not turn my head. The fog might hide eyes. It might hide anything. A shift of air, sudden, cold, brushing my neck. I inhaled sharply, taste metallic on my tongue. The radio crackled violently for a moment, then fell silent. Silence pressed in, heavier than before. I could hear my own breath, harsh and uneven. The growl had stopped, or maybe it had only paused. I tried to move, slowly, careful not to disturb the fog outside. Every small snap of nylon sounded loud. Every rustle of leaves beyond the tent became an accusation. The fog shimmered faintly against the mesh. Shapes seemed to pass behind it, impossible forms, fleeting, fluid. I could feel them observing, patient, hidden. Time stretched. Seconds became hours, though the night remained unchanged. I stayed still, tethered to the tent, listening to the quiet that pressed through every pore. Eventually, only the radio hummed softly, almost a lullaby, and the growl was gone. But the forest, the fog, the shapes beyond the tent, they lingered, patient and unseen. I curled into myself, heart still racing. Every breath visible, crystallized in the chill, and outside the night waited. Fresh snow blanketed the forest floor, soft and silent. Each step I took crunched faintly, swallowed almost immediately by the cold. The air was brittle, sharp against my lungs. Footprints appeared, large, deliberate, unlike any animal I knew. They pressed deep into the snow, leading toward a hollow cave I hadn't noticed before. A low wind carried echoes, almost like distant howls bouncing between the trees. I paused, breath forming clouds in the frozen air. The snow muffled everything, yet the forest seemed alive. Branches swayed without wind, shadows shifting in impossible angles. The cave yawned ahead, dark and silent. Its entrance seemed to breathe, a hollow sigh that drew me closer. Every instinct warned me, but curiosity pressed me forward. The paw prints continued, jagged and uneven, disappearing into the blackness. I followed cautiously, snow crunching underfoot, cold seeping into my bones. The forest held its breath, waiting, patient. A whisper for a brush to branch. Or was it something else? I spun, but the snow-covered clearing was empty. The prints had no companion visible. Yet I knew something had passed this way. The wind carried a faint, low howl again. Closer now, resonant in my chest, vibrating through the snow. I could feel it in the ground, through the soles of my boots, through every nerve. Icicles formed along the cave's edge, sparkling faintly in pale moonlight. The paw prints led directly inside, dark and hollow, like the forest had swallowed them. I hesitated, fingers numb, heart tightening. Something shifted inside the shadows. Movement too quick, too deliberate to be a trick of light. I could sense eyes, watching, waiting, just beyond the snow-laden rocks. The air smelled of frost and earth, with a faint metallic tang. My breath puffed in front of me, visible, fragile in the stillness. Every step forward echoed softly, disappearing into the cave's mouth. I pressed closer, boots crunching over snow and ice. The paw prints disappeared into darkness, leaving only silence. A low howl rolled again, distant yet impossibly near, echoing in a hollow. I wanted to turn back, to retreat into the safety of familiar trees. But the cave, it called, patient, silent, alive. The snow held its secrets, and the wind carried whispers of what waited inside. I lingered at the entrance, listening, feeling the force around me. The paw prints led onward. The hollow seemed to breathe. And the howls promised something unseen, waiting. The lake lay frozen, smooth and silver under the pale morning light. Ripples broke its surface, though no one was near. Each movement of water felt deliberate, almost sentient. Branches rustled behind me, though no path existed. The sound moved closer, circling, brushing against the stillness. I froze, the cold biting at my cheeks, the mist curling around my boots. The reflection in the ice-shimmered water caught my eye. An impossible silhouette lingered just beyond the glassy surface. It wasn't human, yet it mirrored me in a way that was almost intimate. I stepped cautiously, the snow crunching beneath my weight. Each footfall seemed to echo in the frozen air, swallowed almost immediately. The rustling shifted with me, never staying still, always just beyond reach. The smell of wet pine and icy water mixed with something faintly metallic. It pricked at my senses, a subtle warning I couldn't ignore. The reflection in the water flickered, eyes pale and watching, then gone. A sudden gust, or maybe breath, swept across the lake. The branches shivered, shaking fine snow onto the ice. I felt watched from every angle, though no eyes met mine. The silhouette returned, dissolving into ripples and light. My heartbeat rose, each thump audible in the silence of the frozen forest. I wanted to speak, to call, but the sound caught in my throat. I traced the shoreline, careful not to disturb the frozen surface. Every rustle, every shadow seemed deliberate, moving with a purpose I couldn't name. The air was thick, almost tangible, pressing in around me. The sun tried to pierce the fog, but its light only highlighted the shimmer of the lake. The reflection shifted again, impossible angles twisting beneath the ice. I realized I couldn't distinguish the real from the reflected, the living from the shadow. Branches snapped softly behind me, yet there was no path, no trace of movement. I turned, breath forming clouds in the air, but saw only the frozen world. Still, the feeling persisted, something unseen, circling, waiting. I leaned closer to the water, curiosity stronger than fear. The reflection pulsed, an echo of my own movement, yet wrong, distorted. The lake held its secrets, and the rustling promised more than the eye could see. I stepped back, snow crunching beneath boots. The frozen lake lay still again, yet I knew the shapes lingered, twisting just beyond sight, aware of every careful step. And I walked on along the silent shore, every breath visible, every rustle followed, drawn into the subtle terror of the lake that should have been still. The forest thickened, branches curling like fingers against the dim light. A chill pressed into my shoulders, even though the air felt still. The scent of pine and cold earth clung to everything, heavy and alive. I saw them first in glimpses. Pale eyes, flicking between trunks, vanishing when I stared. They weren't quite human, yet they studied me, patient and silent. A cold breath brushed my neck. I froze, heart tightening, every nerve alert. The forest seemed to lean closer, listening. Twigs snapped softly beneath invisible feet. Shadows shifted against shadows, twisting in ways impossible. The eyes appeared again, farther, closer, always watching, always retreating. The air tasted metallic, sharp. Each step I took made no sound, though the snow or dirt had given me away. Yet something moved with me, synchronized, deliberate. I pressed on, lantern swinging faintly, its light trembling. Shadows stretched unnaturally, reaching beyond tree trunks. The eyes followed, reflections in the darkness, cold and unblinking. The forest smelled older here, damp and mossy, layered with decay. I could feel the eyes in my periphery, but every time I turned, nothing. Only the whisper of leaves, the gentle shiver of branches. A branch shook violently, though no wind moved. I stumbled back, senses screaming. The eyes vanished into the pines, leaving a silence that pressed against my chest. Every shadow seemed alive, every tree aware. I slowed, careful not to breathe too loudly, not to betray my presence. The pale eyes returned just for a moment, and then were gone. The forest felt like it had a heartbeat of its own. I could hear it in the soft rustle of leaves, the subtle shifting beneath the soil, and I realized I was not merely being watched. I was being followed, step by cautious step, by eyes pale and patient, by the living, breathing forest itself. The ridge rose ahead, crowned by a lonely watchtower. Its wood sagged, weathered and gray, a shadow against the fading light. The air smelled of damp pine and old timber, cold and heavy. I climbed the slope slowly, snow crunching softly beneath my boots. The tower loomed closer, silent, patient. Something about it seemed alive, though nothing moved. Inside, the floorboards creaked beneath me, faint but deliberate. Shadows danced across the walls, bending and twisting with no source of light. I held my breath, feeling the weight of silence pressing in. The windows were cracked, letting in cold air that smelled faintly metallic. I pressed my palm to the glass. Frost bit my fingers. A low, almost imperceptible scratching sound echoed above me, then stopped. The shadows shifted again, stretching unnaturally. They moved independently, brushing corners, bending over edges that shouldn't exist. I wanted to call out, to break the quiet, but no sound came. The tower seemed empty, Yet every nerve told me I was not alone. I could feel eyes tracking me, patient and deliberate. The air felt heavier, the silence deeper, as if the walls themselves were breathing. A floorboard groaned softly underfoot. Though I had stepped elsewhere, I froze, listening. The sound dissolved into the static of empty air, leaving nothing but tension. The smell of damp wood and earth wrapped around me. I moved toward the stairs, each step careful, measured. Shadows flickered across the walls, forming shapes that might have been human or might not. The tower held its secrets patiently. Every creak, every shift of shadow, was deliberate, teasing, unyielding. I lingered near the top, peering out over the ridge, feeling the forest press against the old wood. The sun dipped lower, and darkness pooled in the corners. Silence thickened, almost physical, folding around me like fog. I could sense the forest and the tower watching me together, patient, hidden, alive. And I left, step by careful step. The echo of creaking would follow me into the night, knowing the shadows remained, waiting, patient, unseen. The full moon cast silver across the clearing. The frost on the grass glittered faintly, like tiny shards of glass. The air smelled cold, crisp, and metallic, carrying the faint scent of pine. A howl echoed through the trees, distant, layered, impossible. It rolled over the ridge, reverberating in my chest, in my bones. Another answered, closer this time, yet still just beyond reach. Shadows shifted under the moonlight. Branches swayed, though the wind was absent. Something moved against the silver glow, a figure I could not hold, then vanished. I stood still, heart beating loud in the quiet. The moonlight carved shapes into the forest floor, shapes that seemed to twitch when I looked away. Eyes, or reflections, glimmered in the distance, pale and watchful. The howls layered, harmonizing into something ancient. I could feel their echo vibrating through the soil, through the frost, through every nerve. It was awe-inspiring, terrifying, impossible to ignore. The clearing seemed wider than it was, stretching into the shadows. Every sound I made, my breath, my cautious steps, was magnified, swallowed, returned by the trees. The figure appeared again, a silhouette against the moon, impossible to place. A cold gust rustled the branches. I shivered, the air tasting of frost and iron. The shadows twisted unnaturally, dancing on the edges of perception. Another howl, impossibly close, made my chest tighten. I turned slowly, expecting, fearing, but nothing materialized. Only the moon, silver and patient, illuminating the clearing with quiet authority. The forest held its breath, and I felt suspended, balanced between fascination and fear. The howls continued, layered, distant, close, everywhere at once. I stepped forward, careful, drawn to the sound, to the shadows, to the silver-lit figure that vanished whenever I tried to focus. The clearing seemed alive, whispering with the voices of the night. And I listened, breath visible in the cold, heart caught between awe and terror, while the moonlit howls carried on, patient and eternal. The cabin stood alone, shivering against the edge of the forest. Its windows flickered with a strange, unsteady light, though no flame burned inside. The air smelled of cold wood and damp earth, thick with quiet. I stepped closer, snow crunching softly underfoot. The door sagged on rusted hinges, moving as if breathing. Inside, the floorboards groaned faintly, though I moved slowly, carefully. Strange symbols were etched into the walls, rough and jagged, unfamiliar. The air was colder here, carrying a faint metallic tang. A soft, almost imperceptible breath came from the far corner. I froze. No shape could be seen, yet the sound was deliberate, measured, aware. The cabin felt alive, every shadow curling toward me like tendrils. My lantern flickered, throwing trembling light across the etched symbols. The carving seemed to shift in the corner of my eye, lines twisting subtly, impossible angles forming and dissolving. The smell of pine and smoke drifted faintly from somewhere beyond the walls. I pressed forward, cautious, every step deliberate. The air grew heavier, pressing against my chest, making each breath sharp. A faint movement flickered in the shadows. I held my breath, unable to tell if it was a trick of light or something else. The corners of the cabin seemed to stretch, swallowing the light, the warmth. The strange breath came again, slow and deliberate. I could feel on my skin, cold, fleeting, brushing like a whisper. No sound but the echo of my heartbeat filled the hollow space. The symbols etched deeper into my awareness, their jagged edges pressing on the mind, impossible to ignore. The cabin held its secrets silently, patiently, as if waiting. I wanted to step back to leave, but the quiet compelled me to linger, drawn by curiosity mingled with unease, feeling every heartbeat, every breath, every flicker of the unseen. I left the corner dark, the cabin holding its quiet, its symbols, its shadows, its patient, breathing presence. And outside the night waited, cold and still, carrying the forest's watchful gaze. Night descended fast over the ridge, fog thickening with each step. The world felt smaller, closer, as if the mist pressed in around me. The scent of wet earth and pine mingled with the cold, sharp air. A low growl vibrated beneath the hill, deep and deliberate. It rolled through the fog, carrying a weight that pressed against my chest. I froze, listening, heartbeat loud in the quiet. Shadows moved within the mist. Shapes shifted, intelligent, deliberate, always just beyond sight. The fog blurred edges, making familiar trees strange, twisted. I stepped cautiously, boots crunching over loose stones hidden by the haze. Branches brushed my shoulders, soft and cold, like ghostly hands. Every step echoed, yet the fog swallowed sound immediately. The growl returned, closer now, reverberating through the slope. I turned slowly, sensing movement, but nothing fully emerged from the gray. Only shadows, stretching unnaturally, waiting. The ridge seemed alive, every stone and tree aware. The fog swirled around me, curling at my feet, reaching for my legs. My breath puffed in the cold, visible, fragile against the thickness of night. A snapping branch echoed somewhere above, deliberate, deliberate. I froze, watching the shapes that danced and shifted in the mist. Eyes, pale or hidden, might have been watching. The growl softened, became a rumble that resonated in the ground. The fog thickened, swallowing the path I had followed, leaving me unsure which way was forward, which way led to safety. I pressed on, careful, step by step, heart tight in my chest, senses straining. The ridge held its secrets, patient, silent, aware of my presence. Night deepened, fog curling around trees like living smoke. Every sound, every shadow, every breath was magnified, and I realized the ridge was not empty. Something waited, deliberate and unseen, moving in the fog, patient and intelligent, as I made my way, step by careful step, through the deep, silent suspense of nightfall. Shadows passed over rocks and tree trunks, moving with a fluid, unnatural grace. The forest smelled of wet moss and cold earth, thick and pressing. Every step I took seemed louder than the last, swallowed immediately by the dense air. I sensed I was being followed, not by human footsteps, not by the wind. Something else, a subtle brush against the undergrowth, a whisper of movement, always behind me. The air carried faint echoes, like animal sounds twisted into words I almost understood. Low growls, soft clicks, murmurs that teased the edge of comprehension. They blended with the rustling leaves, almost indistinguishable from the forest itself. Branches snapped under invisible feet. I froze, heartbeat thundering in my chest, eyes scanning for shapes that vanished the moment I focused. The shadows moved independently, stretching across the snow, the rocks, the trunks. Fur-like forms flickered at the corners of my vision. Pale eyes glimmered briefly, then disappeared into the dark. Each glimpse felt deliberate, a silent warning, or perhaps an invitation. The wind carried scents I couldn't name, metal, earth, something faintly sweet. It swirled around me, lifting hairs on my arms, brushing my face with a cold caress. The forest seemed alive, aware of each step, each breath. I pressed on cautiously, letting the snow muffle my movements. Every sound beyond my own seemed amplified, every shadow stretching with intention. The whispers of fur-like forms echoed faintly, weaving around me, around the trees. A twig snapped sharply. I stopped, frozen, listening. The forest exhaled slowly, the shadows retreating only to gather again just beyond sight. The pale eyes returned briefly, reflecting the faint moonlight. They studied me, patient, lingering, then were gone, and still I could feel the silent, watchful presence threading through the trees. Step by careful step, I moved forward, drawn into the forest quiet, haunted by the echoes of fur, by shapes that existed just beyond understanding, by the subtle, patient, living dread surrounding me. A lone lantern flickered in the distance, pale and hesitant. The forest around it seemed darker for the contrast, swallowing every shadow. Its light pulsed, almost alive, casting trembling shapes across the snow and trees. I approached slowly, boots crunching over frost and dry leaves. Each step made the lantern dance, shadows twisting unnaturally. The air smelled cold, metallic, tinged with pine and damp earth. The clearing was empty. No one stood beneath the flickering light. No footprints led toward it. Only those that led away, fading into the forest. I paused, breath forming clouds in the chill. The lantern swayed, teasing me, calling me forward, but when I stepped closer, the light seemed to retreat, just beyond reach. Branches shivered in the absence of wind, snow falling from their tips like quiet warnings. The forest felt aware, patient, observing my every movement. The footprints leading away were large, deliberate, pressed deep into the soft earth and snow, and yet they showed no companion, no source, no answer. A subtle hum seemed to linger around the lantern, like static, like breath, almost a whisper I could not place. I tilted my head, scanning the clearing, but saw only the flickering glow. The forest pressed close, shadowed and patient, waiting as I stepped cautiously, drawn to the light that revealed nothing. Every sense heightened, every sound amplified. The soft crackle of snow, the faint sigh of branches, the distant rustle of leaves. I lingered for a moment, curiosity stronger than fear, studying the empty clearing, the footprints, the impossible lantern. And then, quietly, I realized I was not meant to touch the light, only to witness it, distant and untouchable, fading into forest as I stepped back, careful, deliberate. The lantern flickered one last time before the shadows claimed it completely, and I walked on heart tight, senses alert, drawn further into the subtle, patient terror of the woods. The trees shivered, though the air was still. No wind moved the branches, yet they shook, small twigs snapping under invisible weight. The forest felt alive, watching, aware of every movement I made. I stepped carefully, boots crunching softly on dry leaves. Each sound seemed amplified, echoing unnaturally through the trunks. Something lingered just beyond my vision, patient, observing. Shadows stretched long and thin, twisting across the ground, shifting as if they had minds of their own. I felt eyes on me, pale and unblinking, following each step. A subtle rustle sounded behind me, but there was no path, no one, only the shivering of branches. I froze, heart tightening, breath visible in the cold, stagnant air. The smell of damp pine and cold earth pressed into my senses. I reached out, brushing a trunk with my hand. It felt rough, real, but I could feel something brushing back, a presence threading through the trees, patient and deliberate. Branches snapped again, closer this time. I dare not turn, each step backward measured, careful. The forest seemed to shift with me, shadows leaning, stretching, like the trees themselves were aware of my hesitation. I felt my pulse hammer in my ears, the quiet punctuated by faint, almost imperceptible sounds. Leaves falling without wind, twigs breaking under unseen feet, breath fleeting, brushing my neck. Step by careful step, I retreated, the shadows shifting with my motion, never letting me fully escape. The forest whispered around me, patient, ancient, alive. And though no figure appeared, no eyes fully met mine, I knew I was being watched. Step by step, I moved to the trembling trees, heart tight, senses taut, drawn deeper into the quiet, lingering dread of the woods. The night air thickened, each breath crystallizing in the cold. My lungs burned, the frost biting my skin, yet I moved forward, careful, deliberate. The forest felt alive, every shadow shifting, every branch aware of me. A low exhale brushed my cheek, colder than the air itself. I spun, heart racing, but the space around me was empty, only the subtle sway of trees, the soft crunch of snow beneath my boots. Shapes darted between the trunks, too quick to follow. They vanished before I could focus, leaving only tremors in the snow, whispers of movement threading through the silence. The forest smelled of cold earth and pine, layered with something metallic, faint but sharp. I could feel in the hairs on my arms, in the ache of my chest. Every shadow seemed deliberate, every rustle a warning I couldn't ignore. I stopped. The frozen air held its breath with me. A low, distant growl reverberated faintly, almost drowned by the wind, or maybe carried by it. The shapes darted again, fleeting, teasing, intelligent. A frosted branch snapped nearby. I froze, feeling the cold exhale brush past me again. It wasn't wind, wasn't animal. It was something alive, deliberate, patient. The snow reflected pale light. Moonlight fractured through the trees. Every step I took made faint impressions, but the forest seemed to shift beneath me, erasing certainty, twisting the path I thought I knew. Breath puffed in front of me, visible, fragile, while shadows leapt between trunks, impossible angles bending reality. I realized the forest itself was breathing, watching, moving with a patience older than anything I had known. Step by careful step, I pressed on, heart tight in my chest, feeling the unseen presence brushing close, aware of me, but never fully visible. And the frozen breath lingered, chilling, patient, following, circling, waiting just beyond reach. I lay under the night sky, stars piercing the darkness like distant eyes. The air was crisp, sharp, and alive, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. Every breath formed clouds that lingered before dissolving into the stillness. Layered howls rose from the forest, weaving together, distant yet close. One broke through, impossibly near, resonating deep in my chest. I froze, listening, pulse tightening with awe and creeping terror. Shadows shifted along the tree line, elongated, bending unnaturally. I wanted to look, to see what made the sound, but fear rooted me in place. The forest seemed to exhale, carrying the layered voices with it. The howl echoed again, curling around rocks and branches, reverberating through snow and earth, through every bone in my body. Something moved behind me, deliberate, patient. Yet when I turned, only darkness greeted my eyes. The stars above seemed closer, sharper, watching. The cold pressed against my skin, sharp in my lungs, and still the forest held its breath, patient, aware of my presence. Each howl layered over the last, a chorus of distant and impossible voices. I felt small, exposed, yet unable to look away. The tension in the air pressed in, thick as frost, filling every space between the trees with anticipation. A branch snapped softly, almost imperceptible, yet it made the layered howls pause for a heartbeat, as if the forest, the unseen shapes, and I were all listening together. I drew my knees close, breath puffing into the cold, the layered chorus vibrating beneath me, and realized one how lingered behind, patient, direct, aware. The stars held their silent watch. The forest hummed with unseen life, and I lay beneath it all, suspended between awe and creeping terror, listening to howls beneath the stars. A small hollow appeared unexpectedly between the trees, shadowed, almost hidden, as if the forest had folded in on itself. The air smelled damp, earthy, and faintly metallic, carrying the quiet weight of something unseen. I crouched at the entrance, noticing faint whispers echoing through the hollow. They weren't just sounds. They mirrored my thoughts, soft, deliberate, almost coaxing. I shivered, feeling a presence both patient and watchful. The forest around me held its breath. Branches hung motionless, frost clinging to their tips. Every step I had taken seemed to vanish into the snow, leaving no trace, only silence. Inside, the hollow was darker than it should have been. Shadows pooled in corners, shifting slightly when I blinked. The whispers grew fainter, but persistent, threading through the space like smoke. I leaned forward, curious despite the unease curling in my chest. The walls pressed close, damp and cold, almost breathing. Every sound, my heartbeat, the faint rustle of fallen leaves, was amplified here, echoing softly against invisible surfaces. A low exhale brushed past me, barely perceptible, and the shadows trembled as though acknowledging it. I froze, heart tight, senses stretched, unable to tell if I was truly alone or simply unseen. The air tasted metallic, sharp against my tongue. I felt drawn further in, toward the faint whispers, toward the hollow's secret center. The forest outside seemed paused, waiting patient, as if it had allowed me this glimpse but demanded caution. Step by cautious step, I moved, feeling the hollow's presence in every breath, every shiver, listening to whispers that echoed my own thoughts, unraveling certainty, leaving only curiosity threaded with unease. And when I stepped back into the open forest, the hollow vanished into shadow, leaving the whispers behind, soft and patient, and the forest itself alive with quiet, watchful intent. Shadows moved along the tree-line, independent of wind or light. They twisted and stretched, bending over roots and rocks, watching. The forest smelled of damp earth and decaying leaves, heavy and close. Every step I took seemed mirrored, replicated by forms just beyond sight. I stopped. The rustling continued, deliberate, patient. It was as if the shadows themselves were breathing, alive, aware of me. Branches snapped softly behind me, but no path existed. I turned slowly, heart tightening, but saw only darkness shifting. The shapes mimicked my movements, subtly, teasing, deliberate. A low sigh moved through the trees, a sound that wasn't quite wind. I froze, every nerve alert, feeling watched from all directions. The rustling pressed closer, though the forest remained still to the eye. The shadows twisted around trunks, stretching impossibly long. Eyes, or reflections of something pale, glimmered briefly before vanishing. Every movement felt purposeful, intelligent, observing my hesitation. I pressed forward careful, boots crunching softly in the undergrowth. The forest seemed to respond, rustling, shifting, every shadow leaning closer, every sound amplified, every breath visible in the cold, damp air. Something brushed against a branch nearby, deliberate, soft, and I felt it, not seen but present, patient, lingering. The shadows twisted again, moving in ways the light could not explain. Step by careful step, I moved through the shifting forms, feeling the forest alive, patient, aware of my presence, drawn into the tension of rustling shadows that mirrored, followed, and waited just beyond sight. A low snarl vibrated through the forest, rolling over roots and rocks. It was deep, deliberate, and seemed to press against my chest. The air smelled of damp pine and cold earth, thick and heavy. I froze, boots rooted to the soft ground. Silence returned immediately afterward, sharp and complete, as if the sound had vanished into nothing, leaving only tension. The trees stood still, shadows pooling in impossible angles. Every nerve in my body strained, listening for the next movement, the next echo, the next sign of life or unlife around me. Branches quivered softly, though no wind moved them. A faint rustle traced behind me, brushing my shoulder. Yet when I turned, there was nothing, only empty forest stretching into gray shadows. The snarl had left its mark on the air, a subtle vibration that lingered in my bones, threading through the silence, making the quiet almost unbearable. Every sound, my breath, the crunch of leaves underfoot, was amplified. I stepped cautiously, careful not to disturb the forest further, feeling the unseen presence everywhere, patient, deliberate. The snow, the moss, the earth all seemed to hold their breath, waiting, watching, echoing the vibration of that distant snarl. And though nothing appeared, I knew it had been near, close enough to brush against the edges of perception, leaving only silence and unease behind. Step by careful step, I moved forward, heart pounding, senses stretched, drawn deeper into the forest that hummed with hidden life, and the memory of the snarl lingered, patient, deliberate, unseen. Fog thickened around me, curling through the trees like living smoke. The world shrank, shapes blurring, shadows dissolving into gray. Every breath I took formed a fleeting cloud, swallowed immediately by the mist. A pale light flickered between the trunks, distant, hesitant. It pulsed softly, as if alive, drawing my gaze and pulling me forward. The forest smelled damp and earthy, mixed with a faint tang of cold metal. I stepped carefully, boots crunching faintly in the mist. Every movement seemed to ripple through the fog, shifting shapes, bending shadows, making the world feel unfamiliar. The flicker appeared again, closer, then vanished into a thicker gray. I strained to see, to understand, but the fog swallowed everything, leaving only the faint, persistent glow of my own shallow breath. Branches shivered without wind, twigs snapping beneath invisible weight. The fog seemed to pulse with each heartbeat, almost sentient, aware. I could feel eyes around me, pale and patient, though nothing fully emerged. The light flickered once more, revealing footprints leading away. Large, deliberate, impossible place. They twisted and curved through the mist, fading into nothing. I followed cautiously, drawn by curiosity stronger than fear. Every step was mirrored by shadows that moved independently, rustling leaves and cracking twigs that had no visible source. The fog thickened, swallowing the glow completely, yet I could feel the lingering pulse, the hum of something unseen. The forest was patient, alive, aware of every cautious motion. Step by careful step, I pressed onward, through shapes that dissolved, through shadows that waited, drawn into the quiet terror and wonder of the flickering light in the fog. The riverbank lay quiet, water dark and moving slowly. Snow clung to rocks and roots, soft and muffling. The air smelled cold, metallic, carrying the faint scent of wet earth. Large paw prints marred the edge of the river, too big to belong to any creature I knew. They led along the bank, deliberate, deep, disappearing into shadows. I stepped carefully, boots pressing into snow already marked by the prints. Every sound echoed softly. Branches, frozen leaves, the faint ripple of water. The forest seemed aware, watching, holding its breath. Shadows twisted across the water in impossible angles. The reflection of the trees wavered unnaturally. And for a moment, I thought I glimpsed something crouched just beneath the surface. The paw prints continued, leading toward a bend in the river. I followed cautiously, heart tightening, senses straining. Every step carried the echo of unseen movement, brushing close, patient. Branches shook softly behind me, though no wind moved them. The forest pressed closer, every shadow deliberate, aware. The water rippled again, impossibly, though no stone had fallen. I bent down to examine the paw prints, tracing their depth, their size, the unnatural symmetry. The snow seemed to absorb my attention, focusing me entirely on the impossible presence that had passed this way. A faint rustle echoed from the opposite bank. I froze, breath puffing in the cold air, eyes straining through shadows. The forest remained silent, yet aware, pressing against me with patient intent. Step by careful step, I moved along the river, following the prints, the shadows, the impossible traces, drawn deeper into the quiet, unrelenting tension of forest that watched and waited and whispered in shapes I could barely comprehend. Looking up, I saw them, multiple pale eyes watching from the ridge above. They glimmered faintly through the trees, cold and unblinking. The forest smelled of pine and damp earth, sharp and still. Silence pressed down, heavy and complete. Every breath I took seemed amplified, hanging in the air like frost. The eyes did not blink, did not shift, yet I could feel them following, patient and deliberate. The ground beneath my boots felt softer, almost yielding, as if the ridge itself conspired to hold me in place. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the slope, reaching, bending, impossible angles. A faint rustle sounded behind me. I froze, heart tight, and turned slowly. Nothing, only trees, only snow, only silence. Yet the eyes remained pale, patient, watching, waiting. Branches swayed gently, though the wind was absent. Every shadow seemed alive, aware, stretching toward me with quiet intent. The ridge loomed above, silent, cold, the eyes piercing through the gray. I took a careful step forward, every sound of snow underfoot echoing unnaturally in the still air. The eyes followed, patient, almost intelligent, measuring, waiting, unyielding. The forest held its breath with me. Every twig, every leaf, every shadow suspended in patient stillness. I felt small, exposed, yet unable to turn away, drawn into the tension of being observed, measured, and alone. Step by careful step, I moved onward, heart pounding, Senses stretched taut, knowing the eyes above the ridge never left, patient, aware, silent, but undeniably present. The path I thought I knew vanished into fog. Trees twisted into unfamiliar shapes, trunks bending where none should. The air smelled damp and cold, carrying the faint tang of earth and pine. Each step forward made no sound, though my boots pressed into soft ground. The forest seemed to shift around me, rearranging itself silently, deliberately. Shadows stretched and dissolved, leaving no markers, no familiar signs. I stopped, turning slowly, heart tight. The trail behind me had disappeared, swallowed by mist. Branches brushed against my shoulders, though no wind moved them. The fog thickened, curling around my legs like smoke. Every step I took felt heavier, slower, as if the forest itself resisted my movement, patient and aware. Shapes moved at the edges of perception, twisting, shifting, impossible angles forming then dissolving. I felt eyes on me, patient, unblinking, observing my disorientation. A soft snap of a branch sounded, though no creature appeared. The forest seemed alive, breathing, shifting, every shadow deliberate, every movement echoing in the fog. I pressed forward cautiously, step by step, tracing an invisible path, drawn deeper into the uncertainty of the forest's quiet manipulation. The mist wrapped around me, pressing in, distorting sight, sound, and distance. The vanishing path left me alone and disoriented, yet compelled to continue, through the patient, shifting, whispering forest. Alone, I stood with the forest pressed close, every shadow leaning in. The night air was thick, tasting of cold earth and frost. Breath puffed visibly, fragile, disappearing almost immediately. One final howl broke the silence. It rolled over the ridge, through the trees, vibrating in my chest, resonating in every bone, impossibly close and impossibly far. Shadows gathered just beyond reach, twisting in shapes I could not name. Branches quivered without wind. Snow shifted without footsteps. The forest itself seemed to exhale, patient, alive, aware of my presence. I froze, heart tight, senses stretched taut. Every rustle, every snap of a twig felt deliberate, intentional, as the unseen presence circled, waiting, patient, inevitable. The howl lingered, fading slowly into the night, layered, echoing, weaving through trees and rocks and snow. I could feel it in my bones, a resonance old in the forest, carrying the weight of every step I had taken. The shadows pressed closer, yet never revealed themselves. The cold brushed my skin, faint and deliberate, and I understood, in that moment, the forest had claimed its space, patient, watchful, silent, and eternal. Step by careful step, I moved through the frozen trees, every breath visible, every heartbeat amplified, drawn into the quiet terror and awe of the last howl, knowing it would follow me, lingering, patient, long after I left the clearing behind.